Now, I'm excited to introduce our first speaker to you. You know, I always think sometimes in life when people go through traumas, and I have been lucky enough down the years to interview a lot of people who've gone through really traumatic events in their life, and it's often the loss of someone they've loved. And this next person who's going to speak, instead of making tragedy something that ended their life, in fact, a great tragedy in her own life sparked her to go on and help so many others. To give you a bit of background, Laura Stack is the founder and CEO of Johnny's Ambassadors. She had flown 2 million miles around the world, is a bestseller of 8 books, nothing to do with the subject matter she's talking about tonight, but her world suddenly changed on November the 20th, 2019, when her beautiful 19-year-old son, Johnny, died by suicide. He had become psychotic from dabbing high THC marijuana concentrates. She responded by forming the non-profit Johnny's Ambassadors Youth Marijuana Prevention to educate teens and parents about the dangers of marijuana on brain development, mental illness, and suicide. Johnny's story has now been told in People magazine, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, PBS, and on Dr. Phil. Laura, she's on a crusade, on a brilliant crusade, to recruit thousands of Johnny's Ambassadors to get teens to hashtag Stop Dabbing. She's here tonight along with her husband John, who's in the audience, I was lucky enough to meet earlier as well, to share their story, to shed light on the challenges for young people and families who face great issues when it comes to the use of recreational cannabis. Give a very warm Irish welcome to Laura Stack.
Thank you. Thank you for that very generous introduction, Miriam, and to Mary Cannon, especially for the invitation to be here. Mary is a member of Johnny's Ambassador Scientific Advisory Board. I'm very delighted to be here for the very first time in Dublin. How do you get to be 55 years old? I've never been here. It's so beautiful. And also to RCSI, thank you so much for your sponsorship. The team here is incredibly professional. I wish we had such an amazing organized team everywhere we go. Well, as you heard from Miriam, there's really no easy way to say it. Our son died by suicide. It's hard. I have to talk about his death every day. I miss him every day. But it's so critically important that we do. And I don't want this to be upsetting for you. That is not why I'm here again. If this is difficult for you at any time, please feel free if you need to excuse yourself. My husband, John, is here. He's up at the top here. This is John, everybody. Johnny's dad. He doesn't do any of the talking, and so people think that he doesn't know anything. He probably is more well-versed in the science than I am, so feel free to engage him and don't just think that he's sitting back there passively. John accompanies me everywhere we go. We are a team. He is my better half, and I love you. I'm very grateful for him. Our son, Johnny, was a wonderful young man. I wish you could have met him. He was warm, happy, funny. You can see in some of these photos, always smiling, a loyal friend, involved in school, athletics, church, very smart young man, scored a perfect math score in our college preparatory exams, had a scholarship to Colorado State University, which he lost, had a scholarship to the University of Northern Colorado, which he lost. Johnny could have been anything he wanted to do in his life. I'd love to show you just a quick 60-second video so that you can meet our son, Johnny.
Hi, I'm Johnny. I'm the serious one. This is my brother James, the wild one. It's the eye of the tiger. It's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rivals.
Someday we'll all be gone, but lullabies go on and on. They never die, that's how you and I will be.
That's a hard video for me to watch, as you can probably imagine. In that photo, Johnny was 19 years old when he took his life. Just a few months before that photo was taken, 3 days before Johnny died, he came over to the house for a good home-cooked meal, as he often did. And he said, "Mom, I just want you to know that you were right." And I said, "About what?" I didn't know what we were talking about. And he said, "About the marijuana." He said, "You probably don't remember, but you told me many years ago that marijuana would hurt my brain, and it has ruined my mind and my life. And I'm really sorry, Mama. I love you." 3 days later, the woman in black came to our home at 1:03 in the morning and told us, "Mr. and Mrs. Stack, I'm with the coroner's office, and I'm so sorry to tell you that your son is deceased." And that was obviously the worst day of our lives, and really the very last thing that we expected to hear. You see, 5 years before that, Johnny started using marijuana when he was 14 years old. This is what he looked like. He was such a wonderful young man, full of promise. And how do I know he started using marijuana? He told us. We were very close. I was his person. You see, you may have heard of the introduction. We are from Colorado. And maybe you don't know, but in the United States, Colorado was the very first state out of 50 to legalize recreational marijuana. And Johnny was born right into this. He was born in the year 2000. Marijuana was legalized in 2019. It came out into the dispensaries. That's what we call cannabis shops, not unlike your coffee shops. I was a little taken aback when I got here. The dispensaries opened in 2014. Johnny was now 14 years old and in 9th grade in high school, and went to his first high school party where there was marijuana at the party, because he came home and he said, "Mom and Dad, I just want you to know that so-and-so's brother had marijuana at the party and all the boys wanted to try to get high. And they handed it to me and said, 'Hit this.' And I said, 'No, I'm good.' And they were like, 'Come on.' And they pressured me. 'What are you, chicken? Everybody's doing it.' And he said, 'Mom, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to say. And I want you to know that I did.' And I was so stunned by this, because Johnny was a real rule follower up to this point. So I said to him, 'Son, thank you for being honest. And I have to tell you, I'm really surprised by your choice, because that's not like you. You know the rules of the family. No drinking, no smoking, no drugs, no marijuana. You can count them on 4 fingers. And I have to tell you, son,' I said to him, 'don't ever do that again. Because that genius mind of yours, that will be destroyed.' And we dropped it. We thought maybe he'll never do it again. And that was just the beginning of 5 years of what very quickly became an obsession with Johnny. 3 mental hospital stays, doctors, programs, $200,000 out of pocket, because nobody would help us. There was no treatment, and nobody would believe that anything like this was causing this problem to my son. But I want to share with you what I didn't say to Johnny, because I think it's what a lot of parents and a lot of people believe the way that I did. I told him never to use it again, but in my head, when he told me he used it, the very first thing I thought to myself was, big deal. So what? It's just weed. Like, I used it. When I was growing up, it didn't hurt me. And I was so wrong, and I was so uneducated, and I was completely ignorant about what had happened to weed since I was a girl. And I say weed very purposefully, because I had a friend named Jim who found some. He was growing ditchweed, we used to call it. And he was growing weed illegally in his basement. I'm 55 years old. This was a long time ago, 17. I remember Jim. We'd go, 8 of us, down to his basement. He would roll the joints. We'd share one. There wasn't very much to go around. And I remember kind of giggling a little bit. And I personally didn't like the way that it made me feel. I just wasn't into it. And so when Jim graduated and we all went our merry way, I got to college and people would hand it to me. I'd be like, it's not my thing. And so I didn't grow up in that culture. By the time I had a child and now he's telling me he used it, I thought he was talking about the same stuff that I used when I was a kid in Jim's basement. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not excusing myself. I just want you to understand kind of my perspective. It wasn't like, I was like, oh my, right? Like, no alarm bells were going off. I wasn't seeing red, right? Because I had no concept about what had happened. And then after he died, we started learning some of the real truth. This is from a colleague of mine who works in the Drug Enforcement Administration, a great partner of ours, who showed us that what has happened and seized samples of marijuana taken over the years. When I was smoking it in the 1980s, it was roughly 2% THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive ingredient in the marijuana plant that makes people feel high. 2%. Then people thought, hey, I know what we can do. We can cross the various strains of the plant so that it has higher and higher THC levels. This would be a great deal, because what a wonderful business model. You could buy less and you could get higher faster, and this would improve profitability. So they began crossing the various strains of marijuana. By 1995, when my daughter was born, it reached about 5%. When Johnny was born, it was 5%. That was like, whoa, that was like so strong. That was like Maui Wowie, like that was so strong. But they kept going, and by 2010, it was 10%. In 2015, it was 15%. In 2021, today, 2025, 25 out of 50 states have legalized recreational marijuana, 39 out of 50 have legalized medical marijuana, and the average dispensary potency is 20%. But that is average, and that is just the plant. There are strains that exist that you can purchase when you're 21 years old. You can walk into any dispensary and buy 25, 30, 35, 40. There's a 42% strain of marijuana in a California dispensary that we found. But that wasn't good enough. They wanted things that were stronger. So what happened is some really smart people in Colorado, when it became legalized, they thought to themselves, what if we could just suck the THC out of the plant? What if we could figure out a way to remove the psychoactive chemical that's making people feel high, throw the plant away, and just make a whole bunch of new super potent products out of that? And they did. And they made a machine, and it's called an extractor, and there are hundreds of them now. You basically run a solvent through the plant, propane, butane, ethanol. That breaks off the glands on the buds that are called trichomes that store the THC, and the THC leaves the plant. They take that, they distill it. Basically, it's spun, it's heated, it's dried. You can have things that are either oils. They add some vitamin E acetate. These are things that caused Diwali many years ago. They put them into vapes. Vapes are very popular. Or you leave them in their solid form, and you leave them as solid concentrates. This is crystal. This may look like crack. This is nearly pure, 100% crystalline. It's raw THC in its native form. This is a butane hash oil. This is shatter. This is rosin. This is ambrosia. Here is sugar. This is butter, and this is a diesel wax. This is what you get when marijuana is legal, because you don't need to use the plant anymore, because you can just use chemicals in a lab and use machines that pull out the psychoactive ingredient. The kids tell me, "Oh, Mrs. Stack, I don't do that dabbing stuff. I just use the plant." Well, in the United States, you can't buy Jim's Basement weed. It's all high potency. Everything is over 10%, which is when, in the United States, cannabis use disorder was first added to the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual 5th edition in 2013. It never used to be considered addictive. But now that all of these products are out, you can't buy weed that is the ditch weed anymore. These products, by the way, are all heated. And vapes are oils. Those are called liquid concentrates. Liquid oil, oh, that was revolutionary. As soon as you had THC oil, you can put that in drinks. You can put that in gummies. They put it in tampons. They put it in suppositories. They put it in inhalers. We have it in nose drops. We have it in eye drops. Any orifice you have, we have figured out how to put THC in it and make users high. You can put it in drops. You can put it in any kind of fluids, and the kids are really good at using these products to disguise it because there is no smell. They're not stupid enough to actually buy the plant because you can smell that. So liquid THC is very insidious because they go, "Oh, I'm just vaping." Okay, we're not talking about nicotine here and Jules. We're talking about very high, 80%, 90% THC oils in a vape. If you buy 80% THC oil in a cart, it's typically a gram. There's 800 milligrams of THC in that cart. If I smoked a joint by myself when I was a kid, when I was 17 years old, 5 milligrams, and that's if I smoked it alone, which we never did. We always shared it and asked each other, like, are you high? Am I high? Did we feel? Right? It was just like nothing. It was just like Easter grass. So these are the concentrates where instead of putting it in oil, it's left as a solid. There are hundreds of these, and they are inhaled. They're also smoked. You can either put them in a pen called a dab pen, or you can get a butane torch and you heat up any kind of metal. The kids use burned spoons, burned straws, burned nails, anything that's metal. You tap a dab, and these are why these are called dabs, because the serving size is so small. It's a Times New Roman 20 point a period. A dab is roughly 250 milligrams of THC. An old-fashioned joint, 5. So these products now, and these are the bulletin boards, I can't even say it, that we have, the large billboards up by the dispensaries for our nonprofit to warn the teens about how strong these are. They are required by law to put a piece of paper into people's bags when they buy concentrates to warn them about how much THC is in there. Of course, the kids don't have the piece of paper, so they don't know. The vapes, the distillates, these are all Delta 8. Because hemp is legal, it's also cannabis, but it doesn't contain THC. In all 50 states in the United States, some really smart chemists figured out that you can take CBD out of hemp, which is not psychoactive normally, run it through a lab in a process called isomerization, close one carbon molecule, scooch over the double bind, and presto, you have an isomer that exists in minuscule amounts in marijuana, but you can make it in unlimited amounts from CBD out of hemp. Sort of forgot the little loophole that said the Farm Act can't make derivatives of synthetic intoxicating THC products, which now will make you high. So now we have THCA, THCO, THCP, Delta 8, THC, Delta 9, THC, Delta 10, Delta 11 THC. The synthetic products are overwhelming, and the cannabis industry is now suing the hemp industry because they are competing by making all of these derivative products from CBD from hemp, which is not supposed to make you high. So these are all legally sold, and you don't have to be any age. 14-year-olds can go buy these products. Here's a wall of Delta 8 products. It's still THC. THC is THC is THC. Tetrahydrocannabinol is the same thing, no matter what format, what plant, how it's created, it all is psychoactive, and it will all make you high, and it's causing all kinds of problems. I mean, look at that Doritos bag. Doesn't that kind of look like Doritos? If you're 6 years old and you can't see in the lower left-hand corner, it says 600 milligrams Delta 8 THC. One serving of an edible is 10 milligrams. That package is 600. That is an emergency room visit. These kids are overdosed. We have a 600% increase in poisonings and calls to the Rocky Mountain Poison Control Center due to these products since they were made. Here's one that's in our yard that we found. There's 20 gummies in there, 50 milligrams each. One serving is 10 milligrams. You're only supposed to eat the ear off the gummy. Do you think the kids have the serving size, and are they reading the package? They just put the whole thing in their mouth. And then what happens? Nothing, because you ate it. So now it takes 30 to 60 minutes before anything happens, and they go, oh, I guess I didn't take enough, and they eat more, and they eat an entire box, which has 1,000 milligrams, and then they are in the emergency room with an overdose, and people don't think you can overdose on it. Just because you can't stop breathing doesn't mean you're not going to have a psychotic episode, throwing up, in and out of consciousness. They are very scary to watch, these overdoses. Now, in the past year, this is newest data from 2022. Our government's a little behind. In the past year, in 2022, nearly 3 million 12 to 17 years old used marijuana, THC products in the United States, and 44%, nearly 45% of them are considered to have problematic use, i.e. what we define as cannabis use disorder. Here is what happens when you legalize. This is the newest data, the Monitoring the Future. survey. This is our NIDA, National Institute on Drug Abuse. You can see the difference in 10 years between daily, monthly, and past year use. 6% to 11%, 17% to 29%, and 28 to 44%. It is not true that legalizing does not increase use. We know it increases use. We know it increases accessibility. There is absolutely no doubt about it. When it is legalized, use climbs. We sadly, when Johnny was 16, 17, 18, saw a deterioration in our son, not wanting to go to school, starting to isolate himself, not feeling motivated, being lazy, starting to be irritable, starting to swear at me. As his mother, he became verbally abusive. He would run away for 2 weeks at a time. We call it an alien coming and taking my beautiful child and putting one there. And this one was mean. And we had to put locks on our doors. We became afraid of him. And it turns out, when Johnny was 18, he decided to leave the house because he said, I'm an adult, and you can't keep me from using. And we found out after he died on his phone, he had gotten himself a medical marijuana card, and there was nothing wrong with our sons. You see, there are pot shop doctors in Colorado who are a few $100s, and you're 18, you go tell them you got a migraine or a hangnail, and they'll give you a card. And we had 6,000 18-year-olds like that with med cards, with nothing wrong with them, who wanted to get high, and it is the biggest party drug around. And my son became the drug dealer. And if you don't think there are seniors in high school who are 18 who have these cards, they are selling them. They are the biggest drug dealers right now in the United States, are the seniors in high school. And my son was one of them. Here's one of the photos on his phone after he died. Whoever needs anything today, hit me up. That's drug dealer talk right there. Here's what he was selling. They sell it on Venmo. They sell it on Snapchat. They sell it on Instagram. He was legally walking into a legal dispensary, legally at 18, buying legal products, unregulated, no caps on potency, and illegally selling them to other children. And I have no idea if those kids are okay. And I saw hundreds of them on his phone. Now, we put laws into place. Colorado was the first state to legalize, and we led the charge. And now we put Colorado House Bill 21-1317 into place, regulating marijuana concentrates. Now it requires 2 doctors who independently certify that your child has a chronic and debilitating condition. Now they have to pull their mental health records. They have to pull their medical records. And we went from 7,000 medical cards to 740. It is a joke. It is a farce. And you can absolutely put regulations in place so that people that really need it can get it. But the kids in Colorado are just using it to get high. And unfortunately, we are the only state that has a law like that, and it is out of control in the United States, and it is a huge mess. Johnny did graduate, and he waltzed off to Colorado State with his scholarship. And within 2 weeks, he texted us. He said, I've been dabbing nonstop with my roommate for 2 weeks, and I feel like killing myself every day. I get that in a text. So obviously, he lost that scholarship. He had to go to a mental hospital where he became sober for the first time in I don't know how long. And Johnny came back. It was like the alien brought him back. He was scared. He was like, I am never going to use THC again in my life. And he was sober. So he got a new scholarship, waltzed off to another university. Look at him, look at that smile. He's sober. He went right back to using. He said, Mom, if you use, you have a built-in friend group. Broke my heart that he didn't want to make friends the right way. I said, Johnny, why? You had a suicide attempt. You've just got sober from this. He said that was the only way he could make friends. He called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, Mom, someone's bugged my phone. Someone's bugged my dorm room. Someone's bugged my computer. I'm like, what are you talking about? Here's a snap where he said, can iPhones really be trusted, though? He suddenly got so paranoid, so suspicious, that we, again, had to take him to a mental hospital. He lost that scholarship, and this is what we found in his dorm room when we first started realizing, what is this stuff that he's using? This was dabs. This was the first time we really started to understand. After he died, we found a journal that he had been writing in, and I want to share with you some of the writing and what this was doing to his brain. I was set up by the mob. UNC is secretly a military base. The whole world knows about me. And this was his diagnosis. After myriads of tests, genetic testing, drug testing, he never tested positive for any other drug. The doctors told me it's just weed. THC abuse severe, which now we have a diagnostic code in the United States, cannabis-induced psychosis. This is the top of the paper that Colorado Public Department of Health is required to put in the bag of every person purchasing marijuana in the dispensary. Warning, use of marijuana concentrate, vapes, dabs, edibles can cause psychotic symptoms or psychotic disorder. They know this. This is not a mystery, and yet our teens are the guinea pigs in a giant petri dish that has been a miserable failure. The American Psychiatric Association has just come out with a statement, quote, "There is no current scientific evidence that cannabis is in any way beneficial for the treatment of any psychiatric disorder. In contrast, current evidence supports at minimum a strong association of cannabis use with the onset of psychiatric disorders, and adolescents are particularly vulnerable to harm given the effects of cannabis on neurological development. Our friends in Canada, before marijuana, 4% incidence of schizophrenia in the population. After marijuana, 10%. This data just came out. 6% who did not use, 0.6% who do not use cannabis had schizophrenia. 10% of those who did have cannabis use disorder had schizophrenia. Now, in Ontario, Canada, 12 million people, if you are a young man, age 14 through 18, and you go to the emergency room with cannabis-induced psychosis, 41.3% of them in 3 years will be diagnosed with schizophrenia. These are very scary data, and this is, unfortunately, what happened to Johnny. That's 1 month, actually, before he died. In October, I took him to a concert. Billy Joel, he loves Billy Joel. He said, "This is great, right, Mom?" He said, "I'm not only never going to use THC again, but I'm never going to use alcohol again. I'm never going to smoke again. I'm not going to use any kind of drug ever again." Unfortunately, Johnny is now a statistic. And in Colorado, number 1 cause of death in our youth, suicide. Ages 15 through 18, and this is brand new data that just came out. 35.29% of them have THC in their toxicology reports, and only 11% have alcohol. We now know from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, this data are only 1 year old. If there are no legal laws in the state, out of every 100,000 youth, ages 12 through 25, a 9.76 suicide rate. If you add medical, 12.78. If you add recreational, 16.68. So we see a correlation in the increase in suicidality with the increased permissiveness of marijuana laws in the United States. And indeed, this study came out, 280,000 young adults in the US, ages 18 through 25. Now we warn people, quote, "Cannabis use was associated with increased risks of thoughts of suicide, suicide plan, and suicide attempt." When Johnny died, it was COVID. You remember what happened in early 2020. So we were alone and locked up and by ourselves. And I started researching. I reached out to people like Mary Cannon, like Sir Robin Murray, like Marta DeForty, who very kindly answered me back and started to teach me about the research. I was basically in bed in a fetal position for 6 months, writing Johnny's story. You can get it on Amazon, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana. All proceeds go to our nonprofit. I thought, my God, if I didn't understand this, if I thought it was just weed, I bet there's a lot of other people too who don't understand this dose dependency relationship, who don't understand that this can cause in children whose brains are forming until they're 25, until they're 30 years old, changes in their brain formation, who can cause mental illness. And now John and I travel around the United States, and we mostly talk to teens. We give middle school and high school assemblies. We have 215 certified trainers. We have talked to millions of teens, and we are desperately out there trying to warn them about the harms of THC use on their brain development. All the materials that we provide are free. You are welcome to go. The RCSI has very kindly printed some brochures. You are welcome to go on there. There are videos, there are toolkits, there's PowerPoints, there's game shows, there's quizzes that you are welcome to use in your work, in your classrooms, in your community. It is there because I want you to take it. In the last 5 years, we have created what we believe is the world's best authority educational website on marijuana use in the world. If you would like to be one of Johnny's ambassadors, I would love to welcome you. We have 15,000 people now who are helping us prevent youth THC use in the United States. If you give me your email address, I will send you proactively links to all these resources, and I know they'll also be available on the RCSI website after this. The saddest thing about all of this is that it didn't have to happen. It was totally 100% preventable. And I know with all my heart, if Johnny had not started using marijuana at 14 years old, I believe he would be here with me today. And if I knew then what I know now, I could have saved him. And that breaks my heart because I can't save him now. I lost my son. But it is not too late for any of your children. I don't want any of them to follow his path. Thank you so much for the courtesy of listening to my talk. Thank you. Thank you.